MIDI is a very powerful tool. You need to understand that MIDI is not audio data. It is actually a series of on and off messages that were developed so that controllers can communicate with computers. Back in the day, you used to be able to link several synthesizers together. You play one and they'd play them all. It was a very powerful tool. In Logic, we have a lot of MIDI functionality. If you want to use a MIDI instrument like a virtual synthesizer in Logic, you choose Software Instrument and then pick a synth that you like. And I'm going to start out with a drum kit. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to record a drum groove. If I don't have a keyboard like a piano in front of me, then I can use this little keyboard by pressing Command K. And by hitting these particular letters, I can get sounds to happen. You might need to change the octaves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a pre-roll happen. It means it's going to be 4 beats, and then I'm going to actually have it count for me. So this metronome is going to be on. So I turn the metronome on, and you'll hear 4 clicks, and I'll start playing. So now I have a little groove that lasted basically 2 bars. I can go back and listen to it. Now, it wasn't exactly clean, and if I look in what's called the piano roll, down here you can see how this note came in a little early. I can drag it over and put it in place, or I can press the letter Q and it'll automatically quantize it. To be able to see the quantize function, it's listed over here. Right now my screen's a little bit on the small side for that to actually show, but this Q I can pick different lengths of notes that I want to quantize to. So if I have an 8th note, I can Command A, and I press Q and everything lines up exactly on the beat where I want it. It's going to be a lot cleaner that way. Okay, so now I basically have quantized inside the piano roll. If I didn't like that note and I need to move it, I can drag this around. If I need to drag a single one, make sure they're not all selected. And I can actually edit as much as I need to. The colors are determined by how hard I struck the key. That's called velocity. And at some point you're going to want to be able to craft the velocity so you get a more expressive sound. The velocity slider is on the bottom. So now I have this one little groove that happens. And if I wanted to add a hi-hat, I would need to add another track or layer it on top. For now I'm going to add another track. So I'm going to press this one, which allows you to get an identical synthesizer created as the one I had done before. I'll bring this back, and now I look for my hi-hat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to record another part while listening to the one above. 2, 3, 4. Now I have a hi-hat part. And I drag that back because I only needed 2 bars. Now, if I double click on this, you can see that I was pretty accurate. But to be safe, Command A, quantize, and now everything's on the beat. You can see I really struck hard on these outer beats. Didn't necessarily have to, but if I needed to change it, click on that particular open hi-hat and I could back it off a little bit if I wanted to. Now the two of them together sounds pretty good. When I double click here, if I actually shift click, I can see both parts. It gets a little confusing because you're not going to be sure what track is happening, but I can see how they line up, which is kind of handy. So that's basically how to create multi-track recording of a drum part. There's another way to do it where I can do it all in one part, and as it goes by in what we call cycle mode, it can add to it on each pass. So I'll start out with just the kick drum. 2, 3, 4, 1, and so I'm just doing the kick drum right now. As it comes back around, I'm going to add the snare drum. I'm going to add the hi-hat. So now I have it all laid out. You can tell that that kick drum, because I did a little bit early, doesn't sound, so I have to quantize that and move it over. So Command A, and I can quantize the whole thing, and if I'm lucky, I got a good groove happening. Now while that's going, if I don't like the sound of that kit, I can go over to the inspector window, click on the drum kit, and it opens up. And I can take this kit and change it to a completely different one can change its pitch. That hi-hat, I wanted that to come out in the mix a little bit. So now I've just kind of adjusted that. Because I did record in all one track, I lose a little bit of customization. If I go back to the one where I had multiple tracks, I can actually have the hi-hat be slightly off center. So it sounds like you're actually sitting in a drum set. So the hi-hat would be off to my left, and then the kick would be down in the center. Pretty straightforward. So I'm going to take this groove that I had, and because I like it and I'm going to use it, I can loop this. So I can hit the letter L and that'll go on forever, or I can hit Option drag, which is the preferred method I have. And the reason being is I could edit this one and not this one. The other loop function, the minute you hit loop, the only one you can edit is the first one, and it affects all the ones after that. So I don't normally use that. And if I like these all and I know they're all going to stay together, I can actually join them together so that I don't have those breaks. And I just hit the letter J, and now it's one big groove. Do the same on the top one. That's handy if you're afraid that you might nudge it or hit it by accident as you get deep into the editing process. Because I have that whole thing highlighted, I can press the letter U and turn the cycle mode on to line up exactly with that particular drum groove. Now I want to add, say, a bass line. So instead of duplicating a track, I'm going to add a new one. And I'm going to go look for a bass part. And I usually can find one pretty quick in the sampler synth. So I'm going to choose sampler synth, go create, and then on the side here I'm going to look at the factory settings, click on bass, electric bass, and let's see, I'll do picked. Okay. Now I have this in a key of C right now, so I'm going to keep it on the happy side. And what I'll do is I'll just make up something. And this is where the creativity comes in. Even if you don't know how to play the piano, all you have to do is be able to play a pattern. And the pattern can be relatively simple. Let me illustrate. And if I want to get more daring, and then it comes back around because I was in cycle mode. Now I'll do the same thing before, Command A, and tighten them all up. And now I have a little groove. Now it's pretty loud in relation to everything else, so I'm going to bring up my kick. I'm going to take another step further to teach you a couple other tricks here. I'm going to create another sampler synth, but instead of using a bass part, I want to use a piano part. So I click down the bottom, it gets me back to this factory level, and I can ask to use a piano. I'll use an electric piano for now. And let's see what we got. So I have a piano part, and I'm going to do something very simple. I'm just going to play every other key. I'm going to make a chord. Okay? And every measure, each box here is a measure, I'm going to re-strike that key. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that is beyond cheesy. It sounds like a Casio keyboard or something. So I'm going to try to make that sound a little sexier. So instead of being in major, I want to turn this into minor. And what it needs to do is it needs to change one of these notes. But if you didn't know how to do that, I could select them all and I can quantize to a key. So I'm going to turn this to natural minor, and it all changes. I need to do the same to the bass part because that had a key as well. So I need to make sure that these are all highlighted and quantize to C minor, and it dropped this one little note down. And now I have this. A little darker. Now that's not very exciting still, so I'm going to add a little bit more juice to this piano part. And this is where MIDI effects come in. I'm going to use what's called an arpeggiator. And this window opens up, and it's going to make what I've played here like crazy. So I'm going to have it change the octaves. I'm going to have it have variations. I'm going to have it jump in and out, and I'm going to add a grid pattern to it. And there's a whole custom setting down here that I can use. I'll just use a grooving velocity. And so now what's going to happen with that piano part, sounds pretty sick. Now there's a good chance I couldn't play that myself, so the arpeggiator kind of makes it easy. And you can edit this until you turn blue in the face. Now, if I want to go another step further, I can start adding audio effects on top of MIDI. Because what's happening is that these MIDI files are triggering a synthesizer which is generating audio data. I can do a couple things just to illustrate that. Is I can bounce this in place. So if I bounce this in place, what it's going to do is it's going to create a new track and it's going to turn that into audio information. It sounds exactly the same. Got a little louder, but it's the same groove, right? If I do something I don't want to do, I can go Command Z and it gets me back to where I was. So I'm still where I was before, but now I'm going to add some audio effects to the MIDI file, which is totally fair game, and I'm going to do a little stereo echo on it. And as the busier it gets, the quieter I'm going to need it to be. So if I need to go back, remember, any one of these things you need to look at, you just click on the center of it, and you can actually change the parameters of that. So this is actually the delay plugin that was off screen. So I've added a delay, and I've just reduced what's called the wet volume. This is how much you're adding. If it's wet, you're making the sound have more delay. Dry is less delay. Okay? So now I have that going. So once I'm in there, I can add more effects, and you'll see there's all sorts of stuff you can do, and I would encourage you to dive in. I love using flangers. So now I'm going to have a flanger on that. So I'm going to solo this track right here. I soloed the wrong one. And you can hear that flanger on there. If I press this, if I take this flanger and I hit the blue button, it turns it off, turns it back on. So I get a little crazy thing, and I'm actually going to pan that a little bit off just because I have this panned to this direction. I'm going to create space by moving the piano off to the other side, and now I'm going to hear them all together. Turn off the solo. Now the only thing I might want to do on this is this bass part sounds a little bit dry, so I'm going to add a reverb to it. Chroma reverb always works. Chroma reverb pops up. It's giving me a concert hall setting. I used to have user defaults on this before I changed computers, so I don't. And you can choose them all through here. I usually look for like a warm hall if they have one. Let's try warm vibes. Here it sounds like it's in an echo chamber. So that sounds better than that. So that's reverb. It's a little hot, or I should say a little too wet. So now, with reverb, you get a bigger sound. MIDI data is really cool. When you're in the loop window, anything that's green happens to be a MIDI file. And whatever key this is in, it'll automatically turn it into C major or C minor, what it is. So what I need to do is change this to C minor to match. Hopefully it won't mess up anything else. And so anything I do over here, I can have that play in the key that the piece is in. So I can have it either play in the song key or the original key listed down below. And you can see this is where I can test it. Green means they're MIDI tracks, blue are audio. So I have this little organ part which I'm going to dump inside here. And actually I'll have it come in bar 5 just so we hear something new. So here's my piece. You can see this organ part down the bottom. So there you have it. Having fun with MIDI. Yeah, that's about it. Enjoy.